Hi, I'm Yennefer, and this is the Fifth Iteration podcast. Here I explore patterns in thought, culture, and media using dream work, symbolic analysis, and what I call mathematics. Together, we'll see how the stories we're told shape the way we understand the world. So today I come to you guys on March the 13th, 2026. It is that day, Friday the 13th, and you're going to be hearing from a lot of women in the spiritual community saying that today is a divine day because 13 is the number of the feminine, and it aligns with Friday. Friday is Venus Day, and the word Friday comes from a Norse goddess called Freya. And 13, the reason why 13 is considered a feminine number is because every year we have 13 lunar cycles. The moon cycles are about 28 to 29 days. Every year we have 13 of those. So if we take 13 times 28, we get 364 plus the one day they give it to us as a leap day. But we don't go by the 13 lunar cycles, right? Because if we did, we would have a perfect year of 364. But instead, we go by 365 days. They throw an extra day in there. But instead of us having 13 perfect months, they decided to give us 12 months that are imperfect. Some months have 28 days, some months have 30, and some have 31. It's kind of weird, right? And it's also kind of weird that we don't just use the 13 lunar cycles. The reason why 13 is a feminine number is because the women all move on this same lunar cycle with their menstruation, their biological clock, so to speak, their hormone. We're like a clock, every 7 days, we're in a different phase in our inner system. We're doing something different. And that's just like we're able to produce a child once a month. And so that cycle reflects the same cycle the moon takes every 28 days. So we are directly connected to the moon. And so that's why 13 is considered a feminine number. And that's going to be the narrative and the talk for the day. And my question is, why do we call this day Friday after a Norse goddess, Freya? Nothing against the goddess. This is simply inquiry when we claim to live in a Christian society, right? That says there's only one God. Why is there ambiguity in everything? Every day of the week is named after a different Greek or Roman or some type of god, right? The names of the days of the week have nothing to do with Christianity. Am I wrong? But yet to be claimed that they're Christian. And this is not just in the days of the week, it's in everything. In everything we see this ambiguous existence. On one hand, they're saying we're this, and yet on another hand, this is happening. For example, this entire culture has a lifestyle that has been perpetuated around debauchery, clubbing, drinks, alcoholic beverages, and music everywhere, all the time. But especially this type of nightlife. And I can keep going because there's more examples coming to mind. Ask this of people like, do you think that Jesus Christ would sit down at a table and eat pork? I don't think that he would. I mean, if he cast the demons into the pigs, do you think he would ever sit down at a table and eat pig? No, I really don't think that he would. And yet, this culture has made some of pork the main animal that it decides to farm and feed to its people. And I have read about certain gods that want they want a specific animal, or they want a specific type of activity. And I want to talk about those. But there's one in particular that likes the drinking and the partying. And our whole society is built around that. There's one in particular that wants the pigs and the pork and the swine, and our society is created around that. And another thing I want to talk about is our society's obsession with balls, sports, football, basketball, baseball, softball, soccer ball, golf ball, balls everywhere, right? I was driving through my city the other day, and I've noticed this on a few different occasions where I just drive through like a beautiful green space, and it may have lots of old trees, and it may have a stream or something, and it's just beautiful. And then instead of it being a park, it's a freaking golf course. It's not available for the public and for people to just enjoy the green space with the trees. It's a fucking golf course, and it angers me. And it just had me thinking about, we talk about language and we talk about words and how the certain spells were built right into the language, and we're participating in this world unknowingly in ways that we haven't necessarily consented to. And don't I know about consent? Because in a lot of ways, people will try to get you to do things that you otherwise would not be in agreement with. And so the only way to get you to do it is to deceive you into doing it. Because if your consent were required, it would not be provided. And so they have to trick and deceive you into doing things to usurp your power, your energy, and to get you on board doing things that you didn't know you would be connected to or involved in or would have decided to be a part of otherwise. And so I haven't found this in a book yet, but I think the concept of a ball is connected to Baal or Baal worship. I really do. Because a lot of this whole idea of a club and owners and like this control that they have over the attention of the world, so much goes into it. And the idea of being entertained with sports and battles with one team against the other, right, is definitely connected to the Roman Empire and the gladiators and the games, so to speak, that they used to play and how they would fight to the death and all that. So if the origin of the game is connected to, well, I won't say the game in particular, but just the idea of being entertained in that way is connected to the Roman Empire, then we know what that's all about. I'm going to be doing a deep dive on the Roman Empire very, very soon, but I'm still studying right now. And I did not realize how deep it really goes with the Roman Empire. OMG. OMG. I was just contemplating some things, and I was in prayer, kind of like in prayer and in meditation, putting things together. And I asked a question, because why did everything go back to Rome? We have the Roman Catholic Church, the Pope, and why? And I'm like, Rome, Italy? Like, Italy is like nothing today, right? We're talking about this city, Rome. How can such a small thing today have been done such large damage in the past? But anyways, I asked the question because it just wasn't making sense. And so basically, I was led to watch a series called Britannia, which is the feminine form of Britain, but I guess at one point it called itself Britannia, or, well, it's just the personification of Britain, all right, which is a helmeted female warrior holding a trident and a shield. And this image was first used by Romans in classical antiquity. The Latin Britannia was the name variously applied to the British Isles, Great Britain, and the Roman province of Britain during the Roman Empire. The Roman Britannia was typically depicted reclining or seated with no trident, but a spear, and shield appearing on Roman coins of the 2nd century AD. Well, I just read that from Wikipedia. But what I'm getting at is literally in the first episode of that series, the girl who I believe is this helmeted female warrior that represents Britain, its original Britain, who I also think is the Statue of Liberty. And I'm going to go in deep on what that trident is because it's also standing out to me. It's also a symbol of the pitchfork that I've seen in the witch hunts. And I think it's all connected, but this is all coming to me right now. But anyways, in that first episode, the little girl asked, what is a Roman? What is Rome? And I just stopped like, wow. So my guides have been leading me to different things. And there are stories that they want me to share and to tell about her story or history, the flip side of the coin or the other side of the story. But anyways, just in this series alone, the series is about the Roman Empire's invasion into Britain and how they did it. And it has a lot of actual historical figures, like Roman emperors and Roman generals that actually lived. But to see their spirituality is obviously quite creepy, but it's enlightening nonetheless because you're able to see how deeply connected they were to their spirituality and how the Romans infiltrated that. But also, because let me tell you what the response was. When the little girl asked, what is Rome? The response was, Rome is a demon. That was the first part of it. And it just makes so much sense. And when we look at today and what's happening in the world, I think we need to look beyond names. We need to look beyond titles because is what has gotten us mixed up. Since the beginning of civilization are the names and the titles. And what we have to look at are what's behind the name, what's behind the title, what's behind the curtain, what's really there, who is really there, and what is really guiding, leading us. We are sitting back and they're basically demons that have deceived the world, that are deceiving us right now, doing very evil things. And they've been doing these very evil things for a long time. And so I'm not gonna lie, like I've been down. I gotta take a break because a sister has been feeling real down about knowing the truth. Is really sad. It is very sad. It's very sad. But what I feel called to do is to tell the stories, tell these lost stories just tell these lost stories. There's so many of them that have been lost. I think a lot of the pain that I felt this week has been ancestral because it's sad, because how would you feel? How would you feel if in 2,000 years you looked down on your children and their descendants and you see that you were once a great people or a great thing and your children are in captivity and they don't even know it and they're worshiping demons and they don't even know it? You would be angry. You would be heartbroken. You would be out for blood. Might even be going crazy on the other side if that's possible. But devastated. And I think I tapped into that ancestral energy that is heartbroken. That is heartbroken by what is happening and what's taking place. And I don't know if it's weird to some of you that some of us been given the ability to feel very deeply, and very completely. And so as I prepared my video for this week, I sat down in my notes and I couldn't decide, what am I going to talk about this week? Because I'm getting all this information and I thought, well, should I talk about the government's influence on religion since the beginning I wrote down time, but I guess by definition I mean civilization, because that's what civilization is when the government came in to civilize all the tribes and put all the people that were minding their business in communion with existence. they decided to come in and want to govern people? Or do I tell the story of Rome in some fashion, talk about ancient civilizations like Numidia? My goodness, which is fascinating. This show, Britannia, gives little hints because the Roman army has recruited all of these people of different nationalities and ethnicities to be a part of the army, right? Because they took over these lands, these ancient lands. And so when they take over the land, the people, they have to fight in the army. And so in the first or second episode, there's a character that he's played by a man of color, our Mustafa. What is that boy's name? Aaron Pierre plays this character, and he's a soldier in the Roman army. And when he says where he's from, he says he's from a land called Numidia. And I was just curious, like, is this an actual place? And it is. You ever heard of Numidia, a day in your life? Nope, me either. But guess what? It existed. And these people have it in their show. But there's some books that I'm going to look into. Numidia was initially a sovereign state before it became an ally, supposedly, of Rome. But they make everybody their allies through control. But it was the kingdom of Numidia, and it's an ancient Berber kingdom in North Africa, where today Algeria is. All right. So this was a real kingdom. This is crazy. And so when they take over Numidia, of course, they change it. It becomes something different. But it was a kingdom, and it was called Numidia. And we're talking before Christ. Right, on the timeline. And so there are a couple of books I want to look into to see if I can find more out. But also, there's another character, I think his name is Vitus in the series, who we find out much later in the series that his people had given him some magic, you can call it, but a song to sing, and no one could harm him. And so when he's under the influence of some herbs, like some mushrooms or something, he taps back into the memory of the song. He sings the song, and everything on the battlefield stops. And it was so mesmerizing and so powerful. And this is a dark-skinned character again. Later, we find out that he says one of his gods was Sekhmet, which we know is a Kemetic, lion-headed goddess energy who rules our immune system, but she's seen as a protector. But I don't know how true that is and how fictionalized that part of it is. He never says an actual land that he's from, at least, and then he's dead now. At the portion of the series that I'm in, he's died, and I don't think that was ever revealed. I don't know, I might look it up and see. But it's interesting. It's beyond interesting. Let's see if it ever tells where he's from. Okay, yeah, it says he's from Kush. Okay, and we know Kush tried to resist the Roman His family were killed. His family and everything were killed. So this is what happened to the Kush Empire. So all of these great empires that existed all over the world, we primarily know these kingdoms to be in the East, but there's no reason at all for us to not think there was a great kingdom in the West as well. Because why not? Because why not? Why wouldn't there be? We already know there were the Mayans, the Aztecs, and the Olmecs that went, this is what they taught us in school, they went missing, right? From North America and Central America, or they made us think they were South America. We know we have mounds and things here right in North America. There is no reason to think there was not a great kingdom also in the West. But because we are children of the West, we are probably descendants of that culture, and it's been hidden from us. Just like the people today that are born in Algeria, they probably never heard of a kingdom called Numidia, because you think it's being taught to them in their schools. No, not at all. So I didn't know if I wanted to eventually tell the story of Rome in some fashion, because it was not something I was taught like that. And here I am in my 40s learning this. And then I thought, do I want to read portions of the Sibyls by Mama Zogbe? Because in her foreword or her intro alone, she explains what happened with the Roman Empire. And I don't have my hands on the book to read myself to you guys, but there is a reading online that you can. But the thing that I was concerned with just with the title of the book, which is The Sibyls, the first prophetesses of Mami Wata. And I know that certain things are associated with like voodoo or voodoo and other religions, and that immediately I didn't want certain people to check out of the conversation because of the term Mami Wata. And so I considered that, but let's see if I can find the one paragraph that I want to read. All right, here we go. However, the Sibyls' most significant contribution were their famous oracles containing the divine prophecies that they would utter in trance possession. These prophecies would be carefully written down by their assistants and compiled into books. These prophetic proses were the basis of Greek and Roman tragedies and plays. These prophetic books were later collected by the Roman authorities and soon became the sole and undisputed precursor to the Western Christian Bible and would later lay the ecclesiastical foundation of Western civilization. Over the millenniums, other Sibyl prophecies, oracles, and revelations were systematically retrieved and purchased, stolen, or haphazardly collected by various means all throughout the ancient world where the temples existed. It was these books that would later be plagiarized, revised, or altered and compiled into one holy book known as the Sibylline Oracles. They would later become the center for the bitter doctrinal or Hershey Wars between the warring Levitical Jews and the emerging Roman Vatican authority. As the African matriarchal power began to decline and her colonies taken over by foreign conquerors, it was the thrones and sacerdotal power and prophecies of the Sibyls that was stolen from them by the emergent Roman Church. Their religions were later labeled as pagan, heathen, under a now racialist Roman authority. The emergent Roman Church, in their ignorance and ambition, acquired and doctored the Levite Jews' corrupted versions of the Sibyl prophecies until one could hardly distinguish one forgery from the other. Some of these prophetic books were used by the Vatican to compile what is known today as the Judeo-Christian Bible, crediting their authorship to conspicuous Roman and other male prophets. Those books for which it was hard to conceal their African matriarchal origins were simply destroyed or relegated to heresy. So that's just a few paragraphs from the foreword, and I'm reading this directly, from the sample on Amazon, and there's actually quite a bit. It's a large amount included in the sample online. So just in that excerpt alone, it really surmises what I've been wanting to communicate, just in, like she put it, that's it. That's basically what I've been trying to say. But then there's this whole other story, and there's whole other thing about just in general, the suppression of like oracles, and which goes hand in hand with the suppression of divination. And so I think this is also one of the sources of why divination is deemed right. And because the narrative in the Bible, because actually there's a story, I believe it's Saul, one of the oracles calls Saul up from the dead. I forgot who it was that went to go see this, but I think in the Bible they call her a witch. I'm just like, okay, why do they include it? Why is it important? Like, you're saying she's a witch and she's not supposed to be doing this. Why did y'all include the information she gave in the story then, But yeah, I believe I'll have to look it up, but it's in there. And because I'm doing this off the dome, I don't have notes and things like that, but it's in there. So they're consulting the oracles in the Bible. They're just calling them witches and all other things, when originally perhaps they were more respected. But it's the programming that has us thinking back on these things like this, like when we think about the programming that comes through entertainment and TV. They're the primary source of the demonization of anything that has to do with divination, when perhaps that was a tribal tradition before the government came in, before civilization started. We were a part of tribes, and we had sacred people. We had spiritual leaders, folks that were seen maybe as like a pastor or a preacher or whatever, but maybe they use divination to communicate with divinity and decide, hey, do this, do that. Name this child that. Name this child that. This person marries this person. This person is not let into the tribe. And things like that. But we've been stripped of all of our holy relics, all of our holy attributes and traditions. We don't even know them because of this civilization, which coincided with monopolization of spirituality into monotheistic religions. That was the whole purpose, I'm starting to see, of creating these huge monotheistic religions, was to just control and civilize the people and put all the people together and mix all the people together and say we have to be together under one world order, right? This has been going on for thousands of years. And so some of the books here that are some of the authors. So David Potter was an author who could be researched to learn more about the suppression of divination or the suppression of oracles, where dreams may come in the Greco-Roman era. Author Jill Hammer, who is a Jewish author. She's written some fiction, actually, Sisters at Sinai and The Moonstone Covenant, quite recently. And these are stories about biblical women, and the reviews are good, but she's also like a rabbi and like a professor who wrote fiction books. Found that quite interesting. She might be trying to tell us something. And then there's The Serpent and the Goddess by Mary Condren, which came up, which I haven't been able to look up this book yet, but the title alone is kind of scary. But it says, using Ireland as a case study, this book provides an account of the decline of matriarchal power in Western civilizations. Wow, Western. Okay. And analyzes its implications for today's women and today's Catholic Church. From the age of Eve to the age of Bridget to the age of Mary, the author traces the rise of patriarchal consciousness. Mary Condren is a former editor of student Christian movement publications and the author of articles on men written for feminist liberation theory. The author has taught in the Women in Religion program at Harvard University. So yeah, I'm interested since it says Western civilization. Just these are the people that we have teaching at Harvard. So it's like, unless you're up there, like, you wouldn't get this information. Isn't Harvard like the #1 Ivy League school ever? So this type of knowledge is not for the everyday person. So yeah, that's that book I'm gonna go back to. And also there's another author that kept coming up, Marija Gimbutas. She wrote The Civilization of the Goddess, the World of Old Europe, which I don't know, for some reason seen her be mentioned a whole lot, but she seems to have done something big. So yeah, that's another title that I want to get back around to. There's Goddesses, Mysteries of the Divine Feminine, which I think is also by David Potter. Or no, somebody named Campbell. And then I got to Man, God, and Civilization by John G. Jackson, who is a black man. So these are some of the titles that I wrote down, and as I contemplated on which angle I was going to take, because there's so much to delve into. So I guess we'll see. This whole Roman stuff is really psyching me out. So I may actually feeling drawn to go that route more so than just the suppression of the oracles and the prophets. But we'll see what comes this week. Until next time, take care. Thanks for listening. If you enjoy this conversation, be sure to subscribe and share. We'll continue exploring the ideas shaping our inner lives and the world around us, one rabbit hole at a time.